and welcome back to the Healing for Hot Messes podcast. This is a podcast for mystical misfits where magic, mindset, and mystery collide. I'm super excited today to have Riss on. And Riss is a certified Jungian Coach, astrologer, a published author, and a speaker. And she is passionate about helping people hack the inner workings of their mind and befriend the shadows that prevent them from fulfilling their highest potentials and embodying their true selves. She draws upon mythology and the language of the stars for insight into personal development. So hello, Riss. It's so great to have you here.
Hi, Mandi. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that.
I really appreciate you coming on. So Riss, I actually found Riss on Instagram through her account, All My Ancestors. And it's such a fun, but also informative account. I'm sure people can tell this by now, but I really love the intersection of like playfulness or humor or entertainment and spirituality, because I don't think that it has to be particularly shadow work, which is inherently heavy. I don't think it has to be so heavy. I think the more levity we can bring to the conversation, the better. So if anybody is out here that is not yet following Riss, you need to hop on that shit immediately, post haste.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Actually, the reason why I started kind of incorporating really funny content into my very serious content as well is because at one point I was moving through this was a Libra season thing. Like it was like a Libra season practice. And I started to kind of like work with balance. And I started to notice that I get so into shadow work that things start to get very serious. And so when I started bringing that playfulness into my account, it really helped to sort of balance things out. I think that you get more out of your shadow work practice if you can do that. You know what I mean? If you take it too seriously and there's this rigidity around it, it's almost like you block things from kind of coming in a little bit. And so I love kind of balancing that playfulness.
Absolutely. I mean, so when I think about shadow work, I tend to approach it like you would approach a toddler or like a wounded animal. You don't go up yelling and screaming and condemning and doing all that. And I think that sometimes the heaviness or the trauma, depending on what your history is, it's already inherently heavy. So like if you can bring some levity to the situation, then it's almost can be like a life raft for you so that you don't drown in the work. And I think that's like something that's a huge problem with personal development or mysticism or whatever, is there can be this it's almost like this quicksand of drowning in the work. Like, and that's the opposite of what we're trying to do. Like the whole thing is you're trying to treat yourselves like you're not a problem to be fixed. And if you get in that trap, which is so easy to do, like it's so easy to do because it can be addictive to learn about yourself and to like unfuck your programming, and all of that stuff is such a thrill. So I love that. And I love that was actually inspired by your own experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Because I would definitely say that at one point along my own journey, I definitely fell into that trap of taking it too seriously, kind of being a stickler about my practice. And I realized that it created a lot of blockages, you know what I mean, when I took it too seriously. So I completely agree with you there. I think that it's important to approach it in a way that it's kind of like that playful trickster energy as well. Like bringing the trickster in is like a necessary medicine. And it reminds me of like the archetype of Mercury in astrology as well. It ties into the trickster archetype where it serves as a bridge between worlds. And that playful curiosity is such a beautiful bridge between like worlds, And if we're missing that element, sometimes we can't get to where we want to go, It's very mercurial in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just really important, I think, because people who are new to, say, the shadow work conversation or new to personal development, because it is so intoxicating, it can be almost like there's shadows that can come out of that, of like, I'm healing the most, I'm doing the most, like I'm overcoming, and I'm really fighting these things and getting a sense of identity or whatever through that. And so, yeah, it's kind of like it. Of course, everything in life, all of it kind of mirrors each other. Is that it should be like kind of a creative sense of flow, of balance, of harmony, and you do it so well, and I love it. Which is why I was like, I have to get her on.
Thank you. I think you also do a very, very good job too. I think that you also um, are able to really capture that playfulness and that silliness on your profile as well, which is one thing that really drew me to your work too. Like, I love watching your content because it's just so funny. But then you're also bringing in like serious topics. And I'm like, yes, this is
Yeah,
so good.
real recognizes real. That's the
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So Riss, I wanted to ask, okay, to preface this, so shadow work again is not really for the faint of heart, and it's, usually there's some sort of process or something that happens or some quality about a person since they're a child. Like everyone has their own journey of what has brought them to that. So I wanted to know a little bit more about well, first of all, about you and this and what you do, and also like what led you to it, because whenever you meet somebody who's interested in like depth psychology or mysticism, or like they got a story, and like I gotta have the story.
Oh my god, yes, I do have a very long story, which I will try to kind of nutshell it. So, I'll share a little bit of background into how I got to where I am, and then also a little bit about what I do now. So, I actually at one point was on the path to becoming a biomedical engineer, and I actually did graduate with that degree. And I worked in like God, like 6 different laboratories at one point, and, like, I was, like, throughout my career, because I did graduate and then I started to work in laboratories after that, but I was working in stem cell research, and so I kind of had this very kind of prestigious path, and it was totally inauthentic. I mean, like, I chose it because mainly because of family shadow, but at the time I wasn't aware of it like at all. And I just knew that I was just so uncomfortable inside and I was absolutely miserable and I felt like so out of alignment. And I was young at this point. Like this started happening early on in college. So I mean,
Oh,
I was like 19 or 20 years old when I started like really feeling this in my body. I was like something is just off, but I didn't have the language for it. So a little bit further down the line, my life looked really good on paper. Like I kind of checked all the tick marks for what you should be doing at that age, but inside I was a mess, and also I was um I had fallen into a pretty rough crowd at that point. So I was doing drugs and drinking and just getting involved with really not good things, and I was just not on a good path. And at one point, I kind of hit this sort of rock bottom where everything in my life was just kind of falling apart and I was a total mess. And I actually, oh man, I'm going to try and nutshell this story because it's pretty long and in depth. But I had a really good friend at the time, and she had been my best friend since I was a teenager. And I always felt this pull towards the way that she thought. I could tell from a very young age that she thought differently, but I didn't know why. And she didn't tell anybody why. And um, I called her when my life was falling apart, when I was kind of at this rock bottom place. And I called her and I said, I really need help. I'm at rock bottom. And she was like, stay where you are. I'm going to come get you. I know what to do. And I was like, okay. And I didn't know what she meant by that. But she came and she got me. And she basically just kept telling me to trust her, even though I had no idea what we were doing. And she bought 5 ceramic plates and put them on my lap. And we pull up to a burnt down factory. And she puts these plates in my lap and she says, I want you to write 5 demons on these plates that that you want to destroy today. And I mean, I was young too. I was only like 21 at this point, but I felt in my body that I needed to take this seriously. Like I felt like like this was really important. And she was so good about it. She was such a natural space holder. She was like, "You do what you need to do. I'm going to be over here. Tell me when you're done." So I wrote I really thought about it, and I wrote 5 demons inside of myself that I really wanted to release and let go of, that were really holding me back in life and creating such a mess in my life. And when I was done, she told me to get out of the car and associate a memory to each plate. And then I had to smash it as hard as I could. And when I did that, I it was almost like there was something that was just released inside of me. Like I felt this liberated feeling, and it felt like all of a sudden I was just purging years and years and years worth of trauma and material. Like I just started bawling my eyes out uncontrollably. And there's more to this story, but for the sake of time, I'll just wrap it up by saying that I decided on that day that that's what I was going to dedicate my life to. Like I knew I wasn't going to be a scientist at that point. I knew I was going to focus on self-liberation, understanding my mind, and being the creator of my reality. And so now that's basically what I help people do today. So basically, what I help them do is really get clear on how their unconscious minds are holding them back and creating the reality that is being created. And then I walk them to their true selves so that they can actually make conscious choices instead of unconscious choices. And so, yeah, it's been such a beautiful experience and such an honor to walk with people on that path.
That's so amazing, and it's crazy because you were talking and I was getting like I was getting like goosebumps, like chills. That's amazing because it sounds like that's the sort of thing that I would associate with an actual angel, like somebody who's actually there to activate and help and to get you through that moment so that you could kind of alchemize that experience and what it felt like to have everything look good on paper and yet have it manifest in your life in such a way that is just so intolerable that you have to find your authenticity and find your way, right? And I think that that's one thing that most people who are interested in, like, most magicians or witches or shadow workers or anything like that, have that experience of, like, really recognizing, what it looks like on paper is not the fucking point. If you don't live in your authenticity, it will be intolerable. It will be intolerable in your body. It will be intolerable in your experience. It will be intolerable inside your own head. So I love that. That's such a powerful story. And, like, wow, that friend of yours has, I would say, incredible points for that, because and this is how we propagate healing, because she did that for you and now you do that for others as well. And so that's kind of how we can all set the fires that burn all this shit down and make the world better.
Exactly, exactly. And along, her journey, she actually had someone help her. The reason why she thought differently was because after this experience that I had with her, she actually told me that she went through a program where it was like very Buddhist, but they
Yeah.
like broke her down and built her mind back up at a very young age. I mean, she was only like 14 when this happened. So it was just like kind of confirmation that there was something different about the way she thought. And it's interesting because I think that there was a part of me that could recognize that. And that's almost like how you also know this is your path too. Like, even if you're not aware of it, you're picking up on those cues. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And ever since I was young, I was just picking up on it. Like I was like, she thinks differently. I don't know what it is, but she thinks differently. And
Mhm.
so I think I knew without knowing that this is my path. And you're
Yeah.
so right. A lot of us who are meant to walk this path, I mean, I call it an initiation. Like we're initiated into that. And so we're initiated, I think, into the medicine that we're here to offer, if you will. You know what I mean? So if you're here to really offer shadow work or lead people to their authentic selves, you're probably going to spend a lot of time in inauthentic land, you know, in the beginning of your journey.
Absolutely. And like the thing about those sorts of like initiations, is like everybody really does have the opportunity. It's just also having the ability to see it and seize it. So it's not the sort of thing that, only special people get. Like everybody gets it. And it's so amazing when those opportunities are taken and then they become opportunities for other people down the line, even if it's just leading by example, even if it's inspiring people who have literally never met you. Like there's so many different ways that it can move through the world. And we can think about it when we think of people in our own lives. I remember being a kid and remembering certain friends I had and having the knowledge that, wow, they were raised in a way that is powerful. And it's like in hindsight, I can see that was my appreciation for maybe how they were parented or how their family, the values their families instilled in them or the environment they're in instilled in them. But at the time, it's just kind of like recognizing like, oh, this is different and this is powerful. So inspiration and that kind of healing can come even from the most roundabout, like not easily connectable ways. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think oftentimes like the medicine that you're here to give is often the thing that you struggle with the most, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's beautiful to be initiated.
Yeah.
Even though in the moment it sucks sometimes.
Absolutely. But at least after, you can do hard stuff and have it be okay. So it's always a net positive eventually if you take the emotion out of the equation.
Right, exactly.
So Riss, I actually really was excited to get you on here because I wanted to talk a little bit about Dreamwork. So again, just seeing your account and kind of getting to know you a little bit online, I was like, God, we have so much that like I feel like you and I could just go for like a retreat and just like talk shit for days because I'm like, I want to pick this girl's brain. So I know that you in your work you do a lot with dream work and myth and astrology and all those sorts of things. So I wanted to talk a little bit about dream work because dreaming is a huge fascination for me, and dream work is such a powerful and important thing in my own practice and world. But I wanted to hear a little bit about what led you to dream work and what sorts of dream work your work kind of leads you to do with people.
Yeah. Oh, I love this question.
Mhm.
So, again, this kind of ties into my own story, but I also want to say very quickly as well that something that I've noticed in myself and in my clients is to help us or the medicine that that it would be great for us to receive. Often our ego kind of pushes against it and resists it. And I actually had this ego reaction around doing dream work for like a while. Like my ego resisted it. It was just like, I don't want to do that. Like it just did not want to go there. And so it took me a little while to actually get into it. And what kind of popped that ego bubble was my teacher, actually. And so when I was going through my certification as a Jungian coach, we started doing dream work as part of my training. And this was something that was really actually very important to me because I'm a very vivid dreamer. And not just that, but I've struggled with nightmares pretty much my whole life. And like awful nightmares with like demons, and at one point, I was afraid to go to sleep at night and I was afraid to stay awake. And it was like every night when I was younger. And I remember asking my teacher about this. And I was basically like, hey, how do I deal with these dreams? These nightmares. And he basically walked me through the process of actually meeting and facing my own shadow within my nightmares. So I had to actually like build up the courage to go back into my nightmares and face the demons in my dreams and like dialogue with them, like ask them what they want and learn how to sort of love them. And when I started doing that, my nightmares stopped. And that was huge for me. That was huge because I had been struggling with this for my entire life, like really struggling. And then when that happened, I was like, okay, there's something here. Like, I really need to go into this, you know? And once I started like getting serious about my practice, so much unfolded for me in the dream world, like things that I just can't explain. Like I'm just like, I don't know how I knew that. I don't know it. Like you like things that just like things just opened up. And so it's been so crucial for my personal development journey, but also unlocking parts of myself that I didn't know were there.
Totally. Totally. And dreams, like dreams are truly so incredible and so powerful, but also so mysterious and so strange. And it's kind of like one of those things that I personally believe the fact that we don't have concrete solid answers about anything about it is part of what adds to its potency. You know, the fact that we always have the option to gaslight ourselves into thinking, oh, that was probably nothing, or like maybe I just ate a bagel too close to bed or some shit like that, you know? So it's like we get these opportunities to really go, okay, so does this thing have inherent meaning, or does it get the meaning that I'm bringing to it, that I'm bringing to my interpretation of it, or how it made me feel? So I love that. And I have in my family, my husband and my kids all have experience with like night terrors. So you're saying all of that. I'm just like, I've kind of experienced seeing the night terrors in our house. I don't get them, but I've seen them hop from room to room. And so it's wild to me because I find that so fascinating, so fascinating. It almost reminds me of like thought forms, right? So having something become almost like a physical manifestation of mental stuff, of subconscious stuff, of shadow stuff. So I love that. If you were to give some advice for people who wanted to get into dream work, because a lot of people are probably in the same position of having like a little bit of resistance to dream work, whether it be, you know, what's the point of that, or, you know, it's not an immediate rewards thing because some people have to work on like dream recall or things like that first before feeling like they can really get that connection. What would be your advice for people that are looking to get into dream work?
Yeah, I mean, even just like exposing yourself to the world of dream work, I think can start sort of creating openings in the psyche. So even just reading articles about it can just start to help you kind of get your foot in the door. But something that I mean, there are definitely like practices that people can start doing. For instance, like setting an intention before you go to sleep. I remember when I was first starting out, I actually created like a dream work altar next to my bed, and I got like very intentional about it. And so this is something that you know, people can play around with if it feels good. Even just like I remember I handmade like a dream work candle. I put certain herbs in it. I, you know, used certain essential oils that night. I decorated my altar that reminded me of dream work things. You can even kind of maybe do some deity work if you want. So that's kind of a way to sort of start getting intentional and start getting a little witchy with your practice as well. And even just getting curious about what questions you might want to ask your dream world, you know, at night. Even just having those questions in your psyche can create an opening for something to sort of come through, you know? So that's a way to start getting intentional. I have found throughout my practice that, and just kind of coaching people through dream work as well, that dream work requires a relationship to your dreams. And a lot of times, I think when we aren't getting a lot out of dream work, it's because we don't have a relationship to our dreams. It's almost like you can even like talk to your dream world, your dreamscape as if it's like a person, you know, and respecting it and honoring it and being intentional about it. And so once you begin to start forming a relationship to your dreams, I have found that people who normally wouldn't remember their dreams start to remember them, you know, even in just starting to say, to the dreamscape, hey, I acknowledge you. I know you're there. You know what I mean? Like, even that is like a very simple way to start creating this relationship. It's the same with shadow, right? Where once you may have had your head turned the opposite way, now you're looking. You know what I mean? So even just kind of like turning your head and looking towards your dreamscape, whatever that means to you, can be a really simple. And then there are obviously other practices as well, as you said, that pertain to like dream recall. Even sometimes I like to draw my dreams. In like the Jungian traditions, there's active imagination with your dreams. So once you kind of get that relationship kind of going, then you can maybe start to get deeper and deeper and deeper.
It's so fascinating. Like, I just find dreams so fascinating, and I think it's because ever since I was young, I've always had, like, incredible dream recall and recurring dreams and things like that. So, it's really funny because, there's people in my life that kinda have the opinion of, like, "Well, like, what's the point? What's that?" And that usually comes from a place of not having that relationship. So, for example, maybe not being able to recall your dreams, or if you recall them, it's kind of like, well, what the fuck was that? But even if you can just remember, like in my experience, even if you can just remember fragments, and I always say to lean into the emotion, right? Because it's like the emotion, you could have a dream where you are, the whole world is crumbling around you. But if you have a joyous feeling, that's going to give the dream a different meaning than if it was you had an overarching feeling of dread, right? So it is something that I think is really meaningful and powerful, because the way that I approach magic and mysticism and all of that is like, your psychology is trying to tell you something, but your brain is usually kind of a bitch, right? So it's not going to let it get through. So you got to find a way to like get to the back door. And it feels like dreams are such a beautiful way of really kind of boring into what maybe actually is going on, because there's also an element of intuition if you're trying to interpret what that means. What's your first impulse if you have a dream about fear or a monster, and you go, okay, what did that mean? And you think of someone in your life that maybe you're trying to subconsciously convince yourself they're okay even though they're treating me in XYZ way. That's all important information. And I think it's like you said, really good to create these openings so that we can kind of unfold or open up to those possibilities for information and guidance.
Oh my God. I love everything that you just said. And I love the piece that you mentioned around emotion, because my friend Kai, actually, she's also a dream worker, but she approaches it from the shamanic tradition. And her and I have done like workshops together. And she taught me a practice that I do all the time that I love. And the practice is, when you wake up, you say, wait, was I just dreaming? Because we tend to like grab our phone or like think about what we have to do. And it's so interesting because when I've practiced asking that question, it like cues to my system to immediately feel into the dream, that I was just in. And
Yeah.
similarly, like you said, I noticed that when I try and think about the dream, it doesn't come in as clearly, but when I feel the dream, like when I tune into the emotions of the dream, the textures, the sensations of the dream, so much starts to come through. And it
Yeah.
does kind of require like patience and being in tune with your body and all of that. And sometimes it's easy to get there for me, and sometimes it's really not.
Totally.
But it also kind of reminds me as well of the archetype of Neptune in astrology, which is connected to the dream world. And I always say to people, like, each archetype within astrology, the things that they rule, I have found are interconnected. So Neptune is connected to dreams, but it's also connected to emotion and intuition and all of those sorts of things. And I've found that they exist in the same kind of world. You know what I mean? And so you can't kind of bring that logic to Neptune. You know what I mean? He just sort of like dissolves it. And so it is a very
Totally.
like intuitive feeling based practice. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. So this is kind of like a side note, but I have to ask you this. So I have an issue. I have an issue with like broad generalized dream interpretation because in my opinion, your dreams are speaking to you in a language, right? They're speaking to you in like almost like a very primitive in the sense of like, yeah, your animal body, your emotions, your animal brain, the language of symbol, the language that kind of transcends humanity itself. So it's I always find it interesting when it's like, well, what does this dream mean? To me, I feel like that's something that's so uniquely personal that's going to be based off your own symbology. Yes, there are times, because this is a bigger conversation, but I think that sometimes the information we get from dreams is from another space. And maybe that's going to, when we pull that lead by looking up, what does that mean? We might be exposed to something that we wouldn't have if we hadn't had looked into it. But at the same time, it's like our dreams are going to speak to us. Our subconscious is going to speak to us in a language that we are able to interpret and understand. And often that's through emotion and feeling, because I mean, that really is one of the most basic and urgent things, like, am I scared? I'm fucking scared. Like, am I happy? Oh, I'm fucking happy. Like, it's pretty quick. There's no explanation involved. So what are your thoughts on dream interpretation, and how your subconscious communicates to you through the symbology of dreams, but also through the uh, felt experience of dreams?
Such a good question. And I tend to approach this question from like a more Jungian perspective. So I'm sure that there are a lot of different traditions that would have different answers for this question. But so essentially, in Jungian psychology, a symbol is a bridge, similarly to what we were talking about with the mercurial kind of energy. A symbol is a bridge between the unconscious and the conscious. And the unconscious, as you said, communicates with us through symbolism, so that our conscious mind, it's a way of bringing the contents of the unconscious to consciousness and kind of bridging that gap. So the difference between, because Freud also studied dream work, but then Carl Jung kind of came along. Like, Freud was the one, I think, who actually kind of brought dream work to the Western society. Carl Jung kind of added his own spin on this, and I actually think that it is brilliant, in the sense that he says that dreams connect us to the collective unconscious, meaning that we all have ancestral memory and archetypal memory woven into our dreams. And so there is collective symbolism for things. So for instance, like the symbolism of an ocean has a collective interpretation, however, Carl Jung also talks about the importance of the personal unconscious as well. And that also is very present within our dreamscape too. And so my teachers actually told me that I need to sort of like, we need to explore our personal association, as you said, to a symbol before we go and look it up in a book, or before we go and Google something, or before, we kind of, just look up the symbolism of something that we saw. So although there is collective interpretation for an ocean, let's say perhaps somebody grew up next to an ocean and they um, developed a specific kind of relationship to the ocean. Maybe they come from a family of seafarers. Maybe they associate the sea to their father or their mother, or maybe they just have a personal relationship with it, and that is also encouraged to very much so take a look at while you are interpreting. So I agree with you in the sense that it is very personal. And with that, I want to say too is I think that everybody's dreamscape is very unique. So when I do workshops with my friend Kai, like I said, she offers it from a shamanic perspective. Kai, has a very different dream experience than I do. For me, it tends to be very symbolic. It tends to be very shadowy. But if you talk to somebody else, their dream experience may be totally different. You know what I mean? They may see things that you don't you don't see, or they may even one person may have paranormal experiences in their dreams while another person has never experienced that before. So to your point, like the dreamscape is very personal, and it's important, I think, to have your own personal connection to it, but also it does serve as a bridge into collective unconscious as well. And if you look at astrology, the 12th house and Neptune, they are also connected to the collective unconscious. So it falls into the same archetype. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's super interesting that we can see that in times where it's almost like people have ramping up of very strange dreams during times in the collective that are like very tumultuous for us or that have a specific theme. It's really interesting to tap into like the collective energy and recognize um, that there are certain themes playing out. There are certain kind of things happening that it's like, even though it might manifest itself differently in everybody's life in a very specific way, it's like there's these themes of kind of, uh, what's happening, like the theme of what's going on. And so it's really interesting during those times to sometimes talk to people who are tapped into dreams and things like that and go, what are your dreams like lately? And it's usually there's a common thread of if you have that relationship built, it's almost like you're getting a surge, like a power surge of like what's actually happening on a larger collective scale.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I've definitely heard of people kind of having those premonition sort of dreams where they dream about something not necessarily happening in their personal life, but a collective event that we're about to
Mhm.
experience. Some people are tapped in that way. But also, I think that it taps into the archetypes as well, which we all
Yeah.
have. It's similar to like the mother archetype, right? Like we all know what that is, and there's a collective interpretation there, but we also each have our own personal association to it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone's listening to this who is interested in more about this sort of stuff, Man and His Symbols, which is a young book, that's like really good one to read, or like the Red Book, which is a little bit more of an interesting read, I would say. But there's a lot of really cool conversations in those books for sure on that theme of like dreams and symbols from the Jungian approach. Riss, I wanted to ask, is there a specific practice or pattern of inquiry after a dream that you would recommend for people, aside from, setting the intention at night, for to kind of get into a space of building that relationship with their dreams? I mean, on the first level, I think it's important to really like drive that point of intention home, because it can be same if you need help with anything, guys. Like if you just be like, oh man, like I just need help, it costs you nothing. Nobody needs to fucking hear you. It just might energetically open yourself up on some level. And dreams is similar. If you say, I'm open to remembering my dreams, I'm hoping to, and then not getting discouraged if you don't, because it's kind of like any sport or whatever. You're gonna have to fucking practice. But like just being open to that in the first place. I'm open to building a relationship with my dreams. That's always the first step. But what would you recommend for people that are looking to build those relationships?
Yeah. So I am a huge fan of active imagination, and it's something that I do a lot with my clients and in my own practice. And I think a powerful exercise can be it can be either, if you have the time, doing this after you wake up, or you can simply just like jot down your dream, remember your dream and write it down when you wake up, and then do this later. But I like to sit in meditation and actually call back some of the characters in my dreams and dialogue with them. So I like to sort of, if I have questions, I can ask them questions like, hey, what is the message that you're trying to give me? Or what are you most afraid of? Or what is your highest desire? Or why are you here today? Like, why are you here? Just dialoguing with the characters in your dream can create that relationship, you know, and open you up to answers to come through. And then also, as I mentioned briefly before, I also like to draw my dreams too. So I have this like process where I'm very artistic. I paint and I draw outside of what I do, and so I'm a very visual person, and so I use that a lot in my kind of personal development practice. But I have this sort of process where I'll begin to draw the dream, and I'll try and feel into the dream as I'm doing it. So like calling in the emotions and just like letting myself draw it. And then what I'll do is I'll start to write down any key phrases that stood out to me in the dream. I'll just write it in random places. I almost like create art with it, you know? And sometimes when I'm doing that, when I'm writing these like key phrases that came up, maybe it was something that a character said, or, you know, maybe it was a thought that I had, you know, I remember thinking something in the dream. Like I'll write that down, and I'll kind of work it into the art. And sometimes a lot of things come through for me that way. Another thing that you can do, because not everybody likes to kind of create art, some people respond really well to like automatic writing. And so something that you can do is channel one of the characters in your dream. So like sit in meditation, get into their energy, you know, like how you felt in their presence when you were in the dream. Just kind of allowing yourself to feel what it's like to be in their presence, and then see if you can channel it through writing. And don't let your pen lift from the paper. Don't like get, you know, over analytical about it or try to think too much about it. Just let them express themselves and just see what comes through, you know?
Oh, I love that. That's such a, yeah, that's so good. And I love that you do it artistically because it's funny. I think a lot of people have this idea that they're not artistic or they're not creative. And so, you know, the example I like to use is like, try and remember the last time you were anxious about something ridiculous? Like, clearly you're creative. We are all creative. It's like, despite whether or not you pick up a pen or you do whatever, you're creative. It's inherent in being human. But the thing is that creativity is like real magic because it's really just making something manifest, something physical, something tangible from the other world, the imagination space, whatever, wherever it comes from, which I mean, could be different in all circumstances. So I love that because I think that's really powerful. And also, it's going to be more evocative when you look at it later than maybe just a journal entry. Whereas, you know, if somebody was more of a writing focused thinker or something like that, the journal entry might do it for them. Whereas if you look at a piece of art that you've created, even if you've written in it, even if you haven't, the emotion is going to take you back to that place, which is a really great way to build that relationship. So I think that's so brilliant. And I love that.
Thanks. I'm curious what practices you have too. I would love to hear.
So I actually like very, very, very much love my dreams. And I have like I do dream journaling. Sometimes I do like artistic stuff, but not like what you're saying here. I'm like, that's actually a really good idea, like putting the words and stuff in it. It's usually just more of an intuitive, like, how did I feel in this moment? And also when I have this weird thing where when I do psychedelics, I have specific dream worlds that I go to or like recurring dream settings, but it's almost like you know how like the Marvel universe is its own cinematic universe. And then there's there's it's almost like they all are different dimensions or universes or whatever the fuck you would want to call it. And I've had so many strange experiences on psychedelics where I have somehow simultaneously been in all of those worlds at the same time, almost like a stack of paper, but I'm experiencing them, but also not experiencing them, but it's all concurrent. And it's hard to kind of detangle the psychedelic experience when you trying to explain it. But what I like to do is because my work with psychedelics has allowed me to kind of revisit those spaces so much is also going back in meditation. So there's times where I'll go to do a meditation. And if I start feeling one of those dream worlds come up, it's almost like I'll just ditch the meditation and I'll go, okay, I want to get as much information from this as I can. And it's almost like getting to replay a dream. Whereas when I woke up and wrote it down, maybe I only had fragments. But if you revisit it in that way, it's almost like you can kind of go back there and develop it further. The only thing about that is, the logic part of my brain, because I also had like I have a degree in psychology. Like I also was very like, well, it's gotta be logical and provable and whatever. So I always have that little gatekeeper that I have to like shut up and stuff in the trunk. But that comes up and you start to wonder, well, is this my imagination right now putting meaning into this other space that I had in dream, or am I actually recalling the dream? And that's where the part of me, the mystic, comes up and says, well, does it fucking matter? Like, no matter what, does it fucking matter? Because what is a dream but to some degree an imagination or a visualization or what something manifests from this other sort of nebulous space. So that's like one of my favorite things to do. And I'm not going to go out and say like everyone should do psychedelics to do dream work. You don't need to do that. For me, it was a catalyst for being able to revisit those places in such a like felt way when I'm in a altered state of consciousness, whether it be like meditation, gnosis, whatever you want to call it. So that's something that I like to do, which is can be problematic because I feel like I'm from the dream world. And so when I kind of spend too much time trying to go back there, it makes me very maladjusted to hear. But I find that's a really good way to do that. I also like doing I think it's like a gestalt thing where you try and visualize being in the perspective of other characters in your dream, should that come up. A lot of my dreams are more about place than people or emotions. But occasionally you get a dream where there is another character there. Like there was one dream I had of this reoccurring house that I have these different reoccurring houses that I have, which obviously are elements of the subconscious. And I think as I change, I'll get a new house for a while is how it seems. But there was one where there was somebody, it was like a guy breaking in through the front door. So like how I did dream work for that was I felt into that experience and what I did and blah, blah, blah. But then I tried to think of like, what was the purpose of that person coming in? What was their perspective in this dream? What were they coming in to scare me? Were they coming in to look for something? And I recognized that was an element of my shadow as well. And so that was a really great way. Had I not taken that perspective and tried to go, can I see through the eyes of all these other characters? I wouldn't have made that connection. So, yeah, that's kind of what I do.
That's beautiful. Oh my gosh, I love that. And it
Yeah.
also, you sharing about the house, reminded me of another thing that people can practice. I used to host Dreamwork circles, and it was super fun. And it made me think of what you just said, because there was this woman who kept coming to the Dreamwork circle, and she would each time share her dreams, the reoccurring dreams about a house, essentially. And which can be actually really helpful, because if someone's breaking in, it may also be showing us where we might need boundaries or where we
Yeah.
might, whatever. And so it can be so helpful for our personal development practice. But another thing that people can do as well is to get like a dream work buddy. I like doing this. So like even just sharing your dreams with somebody and dialoguing about your dreams can really help you process them and create a deeper relationship with them. You could go to Dreamwork circles if you want to. Just sharing your dreams is a really beautiful practice. But yeah, I love what you said too, just about being able to see through the perspective of different characters. That's beautiful. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and it is really interesting because the characters in your dreams, sometimes they feel like they're not from your subconscious. Like sometimes it feels the way that I describe it. So I see the dream. My theory on dreams, which is not a full theory, not like nothing, but I see it kind of like the shamanic tree of life, where you have like the underworld, which is the roots, and then the middle world, which is like here, which to me in a dreamscape would be those dreams you have that are clearly just like your consciousness spitting out the shit you went through that day, or whatever, an amalgamation of the movie you watched earlier. But then there's this upper world part where it's like the astral, or visitations or guides, or like, people, a lot of us have had experience having a visitation from somebody who's passed on. And you can almost feel, the example that I use is like the movie Cool World from, what was it, the 90s or whatever, where it's like, it's almost like having a cartoon and live action set, like Roger Rabbit. Oh, it's cartoon, but then there's like you can feel that they're made of different stuff. And that's really the best way to describe it. So it can be interesting when you do have other characters in your dream to go, is this something that feels like a visitation? And if so, why? Or is this something that feels like it's an emergent part of my consciousness that, in my case with that dream, which is a good example of it, I was afraid. I was like, I got to get away from this fucking person. But as the person, I'm like, I got to get a message to her. Like, she needs to fucking listen to me. So that's where you recognize like all of these things are valid. And just to your point there about doing dream work with people, or dialoguing about dreams, something that can be really powerful about that is if we're being communicated from our shadow, we're going to have the blocks, the barriers. And it can kind of be cool to have someone else be like, oh, I wonder if it means that. And you can go, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you can be like, well, maybe, but I don't know. But you can get some like outside perspective that's like beyond your ego. That's like, no, you're fine. Like, this is fine. We don't need, it's just a dream. We don't need to think about it.
Exactly. Yeah, because with shadow dreams, as you mentioned, like oftentimes, we don't the ego doesn't want to see its shadow, it doesn't want to own its shadow, and oftentimes we need somebody else to kind of be like, "Hey, I think, this might be this thing here that you need to look at." So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. Like people can kind of offer perspectives that maybe you can't see for yourself. And I noticed that too in dreamwork circles, people would kind of offer perspectives that the person may not have considered at all. You know what I mean? And
Totally.
so it can kind of really be helpful in that way. So yeah, shadow dreams, those are like a whole other topic.
Totally. And
But,
it's crazy because it's so prominent. It's so like a lot of people have them. I did a series on dreams, right? And similar like dreamscapes, common dreamscapes that, a lot of people seem to visit. And so the House of Many Rooms dream is the big obvious one for your shadow, your subconscious, and all of that. And it's crazy because I still get comments on TikTok from people that are like, but there's something there that's scaring me, or there's a demonic presence, or there's a whatever. If you look at it from a shadow perspective, your ego has good reason to be scared shitless in a dream that is going to expose you to your shadows. Like that is what it's going to feel like. It's going to feel like an overwhelming sense of dread. So I think
Mhm.
part of alchemy and part of growth and part of shadow work is recognizing that it's not the evil out there, it's the evil we have at home. So
Yes, exactly, exactly. And like, the emotions that you feel when you're confronted in your shadow, when it appears in a dream, the emotions are amplified, the
totally.
emotions that you would normally feel. And so they can feel very, very overwhelming. When dreams are trying to communicate something to your psyche, like they're trying to get your attention, they can be very dramatic,
Yeah.
Like I remember my teacher talking about how when your dreams do feel very dramatic and big and scary, it's often because it's just your unconscious really trying to get your attention to look at something.
Yeah.
Um, so that's something to consider as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. I'm so obsessed with like dreams and the dream work conversation and shadow work and all of that. I love it. I love it. So Riz, I wanted to ask, how can people connect with you further, and how can people find you?
Yeah, so I am very active on Instagram. My Instagram is at all my ancestors. And then you can also check out my stuff on my website. My offerings are there. I do one-to-one astrology readings. I've started to blend astrology with shadow work, which has been actually so fun. So I've been like just taking a look at somebody's chart and just kind of understanding the main archetypes and how their shadow may be sort of playing out in their chart, or karmic patterns, or, whatever it is. And then I do coaching after kind of looking at their chart with them. And that's been really fun. And then I also do one-to-one shadow work coaching as well. That's where we do the deep work. Like I always say that astrology is kind of where we get the information, and then shadow work is kind of where we do the embodiment work and we actually like go in. So I do one-to-one coaching. And you can find all of that on my website. It's www.marisacottrill.com. My first name is Marisa, not Riss. It's Marisa, but everybody calls me Riss. So that's my website. And also, I have a TikTok and a YouTube channel that I have been so behind on, but my business teacher, if you want to call him that, has been nudging me to hop on top of that. So I will be hopping on top of that pretty soon. And those are my YouTube is all my ancestors, not one word, all space my space ancestors. And then my TikTok is all_my_ancestors.
And so anybody who's listening to this or watching this on YouTube or like wherever the fuck you find this, I'm going to have links where we can find her so that you guys can easily access that stuff. So I have one more question before you go, just for fun. What is your favorite conspiracy theory or high strangeness topic or cryptid, or like what's your favorite weird shit thing?
Oh, my favorite weird shit thing, aside from Dreamwork.
Aside from Dreamwork.
Oh
Are you an
gosh.
alien girl? You want to bang Bigfoot? Like what's your deal?
Do I want to bang Bigfoot? I don't know. I mean, I think what I do for a living is pretty weird. Astrology, I don't
So sure.
know. Yeah, I don't know.
Amazing. Amazing. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. Okay, so thank you so much for coming, and I hope that everybody goes out and finds Rith, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Mandi. This was amazing. Thank you for having me.
Hello again, everybody. Oh my God, what an amazing episode. That was so much fun. So just so you know, today's episode was brought to you by The Astral. When life is getting you down, why not visit the Astral? That's why the slogan for the Astral is the Astral. Hey, it couldn't be worse than here. This is just the part where I'm going to do a little shameless plug, because why the fuck not? And let you guys know that I have a shadow workbook coming out October 15th. Shadow Work for Hot Messes is coming out. This is an interactive workbook that I made for y'all to do shadow work with me and have fun. This book is very geared towards play and joy and self-acceptance and creativity, and really just trying to approach the shadow work conversation in a way that is not quite so heavy or straight-laced. It's supposed to be something that is kind of fun. So make sure to look out for that. It should be in all bookstores after October 15th. It is on pre-order if it is before October 15th. It's released through Adams Media. You can find I'll put my link below, or my page, my publisher page, so you can figure out where to order, where to pre-order. So you'll want to check that out. Also, just so you know, if you go to healingforhotmesses.com, you can find a wide variety of my classes, my courses, my sessions, my readings. There's so much shit that I do, you guys. I'm a manifesting generator to the core. So if you want to work with me further, be sure to check out my website. And if you want to dive into shadow work with me, be sure to check out my books. Love you guys.